She instructed the builder to expand the slab to accommodate a television studio. The man looked bewildered, as if the nun had just spoken to him in Aramaic. I don't know anything about a TV studio, he said. I don't know anything about it either, but that's not the point. We're going to build one, Mother declared. With no dedicated funds, no business plan, and no hesitation, Angelica faithfully leapt into independent television production. Unless you are willing to do the ridiculous, God will not do the miraculous. Let me say that again. Unless you are willing to do the ridiculous, God will not do the miraculous. Mother said of her sudden decision. When you have God, you don't have to know everything about it. You just do it. So I think that well encapsulates what I want to bring to you. I have read and reread the biography of Mother Angelica by Raymond Arroyo. Its full title, Mother Angelica, The Remarkable Story of a Nun, Her Nerve, and a Network of Miracles. It was remarkable, a remarkable story. I thought I knew a little bit about Mother Angelica. I've watched her through the years. And I guess she was more or less at her peak when I was in high school, and I wasn't really into watching. I wasn't really that into my faith when I was in high school, and watching a nun wasn't exactly my go-to after-school programming, but she was always there, always an encouraging voice in the midst of a lot of not great things on TV. And I think this book was amazing. The amount of miracles that happened in her life, healing miracles, money just appearing out of nowhere, was amazing, but also proportionate to how much suffering she had in her life, physical suffering and emotional, spiritual suffering. It was a packed life. Her interactions with Pope John Paul II, her fights with the bishops in America. I may not get into that so much because it's just, I don't know how edifying that is. What I'll focus on tonight, I say tonight, but whenever you're listening to this, what I'll focus on is how she went about building this great television empire, EWTN, if you don't know. It's the Eternal Word Television Network, the biggest TV and radio network in the world, Catholic or otherwise. How she did it without really knowing anything about how to do any of those things, but just putting her faith in God. And also highlight some of the things that she fought for that I think now are coming to pass in America, that if it weren't for Mother Angelica, don't know if we'd have these things. Liturgical elements, sort of a return to traditional devotions and orthodoxy. Yeah, Mother Angelica is responsible for a lot more than I realized. So yeah, and I do recommend the book. It's written by Raymond Arroyo, who you will see on EWTN to this day. He does Mother Angelica's voice, does it well. At first it's maybe a little off-putting because he's a guy, but he does all the voices, and I'm not gonna do all the voices. I almost feel like I need to after hearing Raymond Arroyo's Mother Angelica voice for so long. But yeah, let's dig into it. I think you're really gonna enjoy the amazing things that did happen in Mother Angelica's life. I wanted to avoid doing this in 2 episodes, but like with Father Al, it might be too much to fit into 1 episode, but we'll see how far we get. Just to let you know, my notes, this is ridiculous. My notes are 95 pages. No way. But we'll see what we can do. I mean, the book was only like 300 pages. I didn't really narrow it down very much. A line about Mother Angelica when she was born. My grandmother said I had rosy cheeks, a full head of hair, and was ready to go. Mother Angelica said that was a cackle a lifetime later. Her grandmother said she looked like she was 6 months old when she was born. So Mother Angelica was not born Mother Angelica. She was born Rita Rizzo. Rizzo makes me think of Greece. But yeah, she was very Italian, and you'll see those Italian themes, the ability to convince people of things, to do things they don't want to do, a certain forcefulness of personality. But also, she'd always call on her Tonys. Her Tonys were her workmen that would come and do a lot of her building projects when others couldn't. So she grew up in Canton, Ohio, which you say that and you're like, seems like a pretty even keel sort of town, but it was a pretty dangerous town when she was growing up there. And she kind of reminds me of had an upbringing kind of like a female Babe Ruth. Her grandfather had a saloon. Let's see, yeah, here we go. Here's the quote. I couldn't have been more than 4 or 5, and my grandfather didn't want me in the saloon. He gave me a small mug of beer with a big collar on it. I had 4 or 5 pretzels, and he said, "Go outside and sit on the curb and enjoy yourself." So I'm out there on the curb drinking this beer and eating pretzels when the Salvation Army band shows up. Well, they're praying all kinds of psalms in front of me and praying for my salvation. It's so funny. This amazing image of this. I have to stop saying amazing. I say it too much because I could easily say it too many times for this podcast. This image of a little girl, 4 or 5 years old, sitting on the curb in Canton, Ohio, prostitutes walking by, syndicate, mafia guys walking by, drinking a mug of beer with some pretzels. And here comes the Salvation Army coming by, praying for her salvation. I don't know if their prayers are efficacious or just misplaced with all the other things going on in that neighborhood. But what happened was, uh, her mother was very beautiful, had this beautiful singing voice. And so her father comes walking by one day. I think she was washing clothes or something, hears this beautiful voice and sees it's from a beautiful woman. They get married, doesn't work out. He's a tailor. He skips out of town eventually when economics get hard. And at one point, they went to the courthouse to go get alimony, the father's alimony payments. And it's supposed to be $5 a week, $5 a month. But what the father had dropped off 50 cents to May and to Mother Angelica and her mother, May, and then he had just moved the decimal place to $5, submitted the receipt to the courthouse, so he only had to pay 50 cents. So alimony didn't work out too well for him. Eventually, when Rita, I guess we'll say Rita until she becomes Mother Angelica, when Rita enters the convent, there'll be this little tug of war between who can see her in the convent because she enters a cloistered convent, her dad or her mom, and she can't decide. Rita can't decide, so she lets her mother superior decide, and mother superior decides on letting May in. May, Rita's mother, Mother Angelica's mother. And the story arc for May Rizzo is pretty interesting. She had a lot of abandonment in her life, a lot of tough parts in her life, but she eventually becomes one of Mother Angelica's nuns. So Mother Angelica is mother to her mother. So she says that she's her own grandmother because she's the mother to her mother and her mother's daughter. So that's a little wrinkle in Mother Angelica's life that I remember when we went to the Shrine of the Most Blessed Sacrament in Huntsville, Alabama, they said this is where Mother Angelica's mother is buried. And I didn't quite understand how, a non-nun ended up buried in the cloister. And it turns out, well, she was a nun too. She entered Mother's order. Anyway, the Shrine of the Most Blessed Sacrament, we're getting way ahead of ourselves, but this is this incredible monastery, incredible structure built in Alabama. Something looks like God just picked up a 13th century monastery from the mountains of Italy and plopped it into the foothills of Alabama. Not exactly where you'd expect to find something like that in Alabama, which was very Protestant, still is very Protestant. But I don't know if we'll get to or not, but the people of Alabama, Protestant, Jew, otherwise, when Mother Angelica went down to Alabama in the 60s, went down to Birmingham, then called Bombingham because they're having so many bombings of black churches. And she went down there to create a monastery to pray for the blacks, for black Catholic women to enter her order. That's not exactly what came to pass, but that was her original intent and why she wanted to go out Alabama in the first place. But Alabama embraced Mother Angelica and her nuns, despite them being very foreign feeling in that part of the country. So Mother Angelica had a lot of miracles in her life. One of the first ones was pretty incredible. Returning from a visit downtown to the dentist, the lanky Mother Angelica, lanky child, you wouldn't think of her as being too lanky with her way the image of her emblazoned on television sets. Lanky child looked both ways as she dashed across a large boulevard to catch a bus. Worn out socks flopped around her ankles. She headed for the median in the center of the street when a woman shrieked. Glancing over her right shoulder, Rita saw two headlights bearing down on her. She froze. The engine's gruff rumble grew louder. With only seconds till impact, Rita closed her eyes, paralyzed with fear. All of a sudden, it felt as if two hands under my arms picked me up. I can almost feel them when I talk about it, and put me on the island where the cars were parked. Mother told me in an awe-filled whisper. She claimed that the passerby were amazed by what they saw and stared at her in disbelief. One of the onlookers said they'd never seen somebody jump so high before. It's pretty amazing that and Mother Angelica would see, like, she would experience apparitions her whole life. One of the times she decided to purchase a certain piece of land was because she saw St. Michael on top of the mountain that she bought. So her guardian angels were frequently helping her, and it seems like that's exactly what happened. And just I think taking a page out of Mother Angelica's book, whether she wasn't particularly religious at this point, we're about to get to where she does become religious and why, but we should pester our guardian angels. We should always be asking our guardian angels for help, and the help they can give us is directly proportionate to the help we ask them for. So just let Mother Angelica encourage us to invoke our guardian angels. Kind of to show you how she wasn't particularly religious at the time. Her mother had to leave town, leave Rita with her grandparents periodically in Canton just because of mental breakdowns and that sort of thing. And her uncle Pete at the dinner table would say something like, "Why hasn't that lazy woman come home? Pretty good deal. You work," meaning Mother Angelica, "and send her money while she's on vacation in Philly." Rita never looked up from her pasta, but her downturned eyes were now alive with anger, hurt, and instinctive hatred of injustice. She had endured watching her mother go on interviews and come back defeated and not getting the job. And this is how her uncle treats the situation. Without a word, Rita pinched the sharp point of the bread knife on the table and hurled it at her uncle's head. The knife pierced the wallpaper inches from the stunned target. Pale and shaken, Uncle Pete hardly breathed. Grandma Jean Francesco gently lowered her fork as if any sudden movement might provoke more flying silverware. So Mother Angelica, we'll talk about her. She had quite a temper as a child, but that temper matured as an adult, and there were times when her righteous anger was on display on EWTN, and I think rightfully so. We're going to talk about the time that they used her network, EWTN, provided a live feed of John Paul II's visit to the United States for World Youth Day in Colorado, and they had a Stations of the Cross play with a woman playing Christ, and that was one of those opportunities where Mother definitely let her thoughts out. She didn't exactly, she didn't. She threw a metaphorical knife. So to kind of give you some context of Mother Angelica's age and with respect to the goings-on in America, December 1940, she says she's going to receive the greatest gift God ever gave her. And this is going to be, she's going to have this strange stomach malady where it's like, what is it? The entrance of the stomach is lower than the rest of the stomach, and it's going to cause her terrible pain to eat. Yeah, it's going to cause her a lot of issues. But this is her first big suffering, physical suffering in her life. Obviously, at this point, with her father and with the rest of the family and her mother, she's experienced a lot of spiritual and emotional trauma, but physical trauma is now just beginning. And this is part of the reason why she was such an independent woman, is because she learned from a young age that no one was taking care of her. If she wanted things to happen in her life, she had to make it happen herself. She wasn't resentful of that, but she realized it. They called this stomach issue a dropped stomach. And there's going to be a miracle that happens with this dropped stomach. Real quick, she worked at this time. She was earning during World War II. She worked at Timken, which was a big company there in Canton, in advertising. She worked for the vice president of advertising, Peter Ross. So she wore many hats for him. She wrote and edited copy, organized layouts for ad campaigns, and even learned to operate some machinery. Mr. Poss thought she was the tops. Elsie Machuga, a coworker at Timken, recalled she was sort of his girl Friday. So all that business acumen, advertising, copywriting is going to really help her when it comes time. She has quite a number of business ventures to try and pay for her building of her monastery in Alabama, fishing lures and roasting peanuts. But all that salesmanship and eventually EWTN, that's where she's going to cut her teeth. So this dropped stomach that's plaguing her through her end of high school. She was a majorette in high school, if you can imagine that, twirling the baton at the head of the marching band. She had to stop that because of the stomach issues. So one day, one of May's friends, May, Rita's mother, says to her, "Why don't you take Rita to Mrs. Wise?" May had never heard of Rhoda Wise. Rhoda Wise was a stigmatic and a miracle worker there in Canton. She lived in a white clapboard shotgun house a block away from the city dump. It's one of the houses that she cleaned each week. She believed herself to be the recipient of a miraculous healing, a healing that would leave a trail of supernatural phenomena in its wake. The stout woman's sweet blue eyes masked the physical hell she had endured for nearly a decade. I'm talking about Rhoda here, not the Catherine Barthel lady. In the early 1930s, Rhoda Wise's belly swelled with what she thought was a child. Doctors later discovered that she was carrying a 39-pound ovarian cyst. The hospital visit to remove the growth would not be her last. Depressed and suicidal, Wise was committed to a state hospital in 1933. Abdominal adhesions would repeatedly force her back into the operating room. Side note, when my appendix exploded when I was in high school, I was in the hospital with that and with abdominal adhesions, just like we're talking about, for a good 40 days. And yeah, the abdominal adhesions are no joke. It feels, this is where your colon's always kind of swirling around, but when pieces of your colon stick together, your whole colon, as it's swirling around, starts knotting up on itself, and then bad things happen. That's very painful. So Rhoda is going through this, and she prays a 9-day novena to St. Therese in the hospital and converts to Catholicism. So I think it was the 9th day of that novena, or maybe the day after the 9th day. It was the night of May 27th, 1939. Wise claims Jesus entered her room and sat on a chair adjacent to her bed. The Savior appeared iridescent to her, his light filling the room. Before leaving, Christ promised to return. That did not end her suffering. Her suffering was so intense that she even prayed for death until the night of June 27th, 1939, when the light again returned to her room. According to her diary, Jesus stood in the doorway as St. Therese approached the bed. The saint put her hand on the open wound, saying, "You doubted me before. You have been tried in the fire and not found wanting. Faith cures all things." When the mystical pair withdrew, Wise was astonished to find the wound on her abdomen entirely closed. The ruptured bowel, too, was entirely healed. And from then on, she began to have a gift of healing, and it drew between 300 and 500 people a week to her home, that clapboard home right next to the city dump. Also, note the presence of St. Therese. St. Therese is going to be all through this book. St. Therese of Lisieux, St. Therese of Avila too, but St. Therese of Lisieux, just like when we were covering Father Al in past episodes, Father Al had a great devotion, even called St. Therese's soulmate. So it's interesting that St. Therese keeps popping up. If you feel that St. Therese keeps popping up in your life, and you have some special need in your life, pray that 9-day novena to St. Therese, and she will likely give you a rose. I guess you can ask for a rose, but usually a rose comes out of nowhere, and that's a sign that your prayers have been heard by God, that she has carried your prayers to God and they have been heard. That's what she said. St. Therese said she would spend her time in heaven showering the earth with roses. And yeah, she's pretty incredible. So Rhoda Wise, Mother Angelica meet. And this is really the main mentor of her youth, of Mother Angelica's youth. This one is going to change everything for Mother Angelica. I love focusing in on who are their mentors. Who are all these great people of the faith usually had great mentors. Sometimes we'll trace back in this podcast, we'll trace back to the mentors that mentored the greats and just go all the way back. I don't know if there's enough to go. I don't think any biography has been written of Rhoda Wise, but she seems like a very interesting character. On Good Friday in 1942, what appeared to be blood spilled from gashes on Rhoda Wise's forehead. Over the next few years, she would intermittently suffer Jesus Christ's passion, profusely bleeding from her head, hands, and feet between noon and 3 o'clock on Fridays. Unknown to her devotees at the time, Wise had offered herself as a victim soul, like St. Therese, for the good of priests and religious 2 years earlier. Her idea, rooted in Catholic tradition, was that suffering offered to God could compensate for the spiritual failings of others. There's a picture of Rhoda Wise experiencing this supernatural bleeding from experiencing Christ's passion in the book. So if you are interested in seeing what that looked like, check out the book. Mother Angelica says that upon meeting Rhoda, she just was going to anybody that would help her with her stomach issues. She said, I was so engrossed in survival that religion really didn't affect me. My faith was not at a high level, if it was at any level at all. But I was so happy that my mother would try and help me like this. So Wise invited Rita and her mother into her bedroom. And you'll see that Mother Angelica's, well, I don't know if we'll see Mother Angelica's bedroom as a superior will be just like Rhoda's bedroom. A long altar arrayed with statues of St. Therese, the Blessed Mother, and the Sacred Heart of Jesus dominated the room. In front of the altar, on the right, was the wooden kitchen chair where Jesus purportedly sat during his visits with Wise. She recommended that Rita sit in our Lord's chair while she chatted with May. Before the half-hour visit ended, Wise gave Rita prayers to the little flower and told her to make some sort of sacrifice and to promise to spread devotion to St. Therese if she was cured. That was it. Wise did not touch Rita or pray over her. She just offered the novena prayer card and showed her guests the door. I think people expect some kind of sorcery-looking event when a miracle like this happens, or when you have somebody that has this kind of healing power, like bolts of lightning erupting from their fingertips. But that's not, God doesn't need all that light show and fanfare. I mean, sometimes he'll throw a little spectacle into it, but that's just not how God operates. So not long after that, Mother Angelica was miraculously healed. A voice commanded her to take off this belly thing that she'd been wearing around her stomach to help her, I guess, readjust her stomach. And she runs downstairs and wants to eat pork chops. Her grandmother, the saggy woman, spun around. Testadura, you cannot eat pork chops. Yeah, I can, Grandma. Rita lifted her pajama top, exposing her midsection. The blue discoloration was gone, so was the lump. She said, I've been healed. To prove the authenticity of the miracle, she encouraged her 10-year-old cousin, Joanne, to repeatedly hit her in the stomach. The child complied. Today, Joanne is still convinced it was like a rock, completely healed. And this is really the moment of her conversion. Mother Angelica says, when the Lord came in and healed me through the little flower, St. Therese, I had a whole different attitude. I knew there was a God. I knew that God knew me and loved me and was interested in me, in my life. So not long after that, she's going to, Mother Angelica is going to receive the vocation that God wants her to live in a cloistered convent, to enter a cloistered order, which is kind of strange for someone that's very bombastic, loud, a majorette in good ways, in Italian ways. But that's what God called her to. And she says she didn't really understand why. She said, I thought, well, Lord, this is where you want me to be. This is where I'm going. She had to lie to her mother, or at least mislead her mother, May, that she was going to even check out the convent to visit the nuns. Her mother, May, figured out what was going on, and she called up Mother Angelica's friend that was helping her drive out to see these nuns and accused her of all sorts of things. Pretty funny in hindsight. They asked her if the convent, they were going to let her in. They asked her if she wished to be a first choir sister or a second choir sister. First choir sisters sang the divine office each day and took solemn vows. Second choir sisters were lay sisters and attended to the day-to-day cleaning of the monastery. It's kind of like being a brother or a priest, in the Jesuits anyway. Not understanding the distinction, Rita replied, I'll try singing. Can you sing alto? Mother Agnes beamed. We need one so badly. Even though May had said that Mother Angelica was tone deaf, Rita agreed to sing alto and became a first choir sister. That turned out to be Providence. Mother Angelica said if she had not been a first choir sister, she could have never been abbess. She could never have been Mother Angelica. Sisters were not allowed to be superiors. And once you made your decision, you could not transfer to the other state of religious life. So Rita entered the monastery August 15th, 1944. So that was Feast of the Assumption, not long after D-Day. I knew the atomic bomb was dropped in August, but in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but that was 1945. Maybe not an atom bomb, but Rita entering the convent, it's a big event. Maybe a little bit of a D-Day. On a Friday afternoon in 1944, Rhoda Wise lay in her bed under the influence of one of these painful ecstasies that she would experience. While her wounds bled, she began to speak. It's the only time Catherine Barthel, that was the lady that cleaned the house, could recall Wise saying anything during one of her supernatural agonies. She said, "Rita? My Rita?" That's all she said. Later, when Barthel questioned the statement, Wise claimed to have been responding to something Jesus had told her about Rita, Mother Angelica. Interviewed in the 1980s, Barthel offered no further clues as to what that something was. Visitors to the Wise home later remembered the mystic prophesying that Rita would do great things for the church. That's more or less the end of the story of Rhoda Wise, though one of her superiors, one of Mother Angelica's superiors in the convent, would receive newsletters from Rhoda Wise. She was sort of devoted to her, and that'll come up in a second. But decades later, Rita would inherit Rhoda Wise's home and establish a little museum there. I think it's probably there to this day. Mother Angelica, when she entered the convent against her mother's wishes, May didn't even know she had entered the convent. She wrote her a letter, and that arrived when she had arrived to May when she was already in the convent. She explained to her mother what she was doing in the convent. There, the convent, will I tell him with every breath, him being God, Jesus, with every breath that I take that I love him. There will I make reparation for all the cold hearts in the world. Something happened to me after my cure. What it was, I don't know. I fell completely in love with our Lord. To live in the world for the past 19 months has been very difficult. I love you very much, and I have not forgotten what you have done for me. My love for you has increased since my cure, but if I were to stay in the world another month, I would leave it completely and enter into our eternal home. She could not continue not being close to Christ in the convent. It was like I died, Mother Angelica explained. They said you could hear my mother screaming all over the block. So the order she entered was founded by Father Bonaventure, described as a zealous overachiever who envisioned a religious order dedicated to worshiping Jesus Christ in the Blessed Sacrament. So if you ever visit her monastery in Hanceville, you will see monstrance, one of the largest monstrances in the world. The monstrance, from the Latin to show, is the often gold stand that we put the Eucharist in for adoration. It's a stand that holds the Eucharist aloft, and usually the Eucharist is surrounded by jewels and uh, ra- um, medical decorations that look like starburst. So she was definitely dedicated to adoration of the Blessed Sacrament. So she suffered a lot in the convent, a lot of humiliations, and the mother superiors were very tough on Sister Rita. They would make her recite a prayer, kneel in the middle of the refectory. That's where they'd eat dinner all together. And she'd have to kneel and recite a prayer that began, I am nothing, I can do nothing, I am worth nothing, I have nothing but my sins. Applesauce, Sister Rita would sometimes mutter under her breath after finishing the litany. She would have to do this Monday after Monday after Monday until the nun accepted it as a truth. Now, eventually she figured out that they were tougher on her because they saw from the beginning that she was a natural leader. But it really wasn't that tough on her, because even though her sister nuns would break down in tears or even suffer psychological trauma from this, for her, growing up on the streets like she did, way tougher skin than that. She could say whatever they wanted to say and then move on with her life. It just never disturbed her. My whole life was a matter of survival, and I think that attitude of survival just changed places, Mother Angelica said. In the monastery, I had a lot of security. I didn't have to worry about anything. My you're quiet, one of the nuns said to Sister Rita. Yeah, I have nothing to be sorry for. Sister Rita shot back, referring back to having to admit faults in the cloister. They have to basically make public confessions. The tough part for her was keeping her brash side under wraps. At this point, all that kneeling, all those work assignments kneeling, her knees swole up like two puffy, water-filled grapefruit. She could manage to walk, but only just, and kneeling became impossible. And it's like, okay, if you can't kneel, can't be a nun. So now her whole vocation is at risk, as it will happen. This will happen multiple times in her life. So they postponed voting whether or not to accept her as a full-fledged nun in the convent. This is where her superior hears from Rhoda Wise. Each Friday, the messages Rhoda Wise received during her painful ecstasies were hungrily devoured by her followers. Like a human telegraph, her devotees spread the weekly messages far beyond the confines of Canton. For believers, these were news flashes from the Almighty. Mother Agnes, the abbess of St. Paul's Shrine, where Sister Rita is now a nun, considered herself a believer. One afternoon, when Sister Rita was still just a postulant, that's one of the early phases, even before becoming a novice, before becoming a nun, Sister Rita was invited to the office of the abbess, and she was asked, "Is anyone here insulting you?" A concerned Mother Agnes asked, peering through her wire-framed glasses. Obviously, the answer was yes, but Sister Rita responds, "No, Reverend Mother." Sister Agnes had been with Mrs. Wise during one of her agonies, and the Lord said, "Tell Rita, every little worry will be erased from her heart. For each insult, each heartache, more stars." They couldn't decipher the message at the time, but the stars were coming. It's funny, they'd say stars when eventually she'd become famous, not a star like you'd normally encounter, but a very unique kind of celebrity. You hear these stories from Saint Therese of Lisieux or Saint Bernadette, Saint Faustina, Margaret Mary, talking about having difficulty with other nuns in community life, like dealing with siblings. And you usually hear how gentle and patient they are with the ones that drove them crazy. Mother Angelica has a different way of describing this situation. She said, "One time I said to the Lord, 'Today, come hell or high water, I'm not going to be impatient.'" Angelica recalled. "And by 9 came hell and high water. I blew it." So eventually, the Mother Superior, another sort of miracle happened. They believe that the 5 stories of steps were aggravating her knees, and so there just happened to be establishing a new convent back home, Mother Angelica's hometown of Canton. So she's able to return home. This was not normal circumstances. Only professed nuns were eligible for membership in a new convent, a newly established convent. Transferring a sister to her hometown also was verboten, was out of the question. But it worked out. Either Angelica's condition would improve or she would be evicted from religious life. So she got an opportunity to go back home and heal her knees. On October 2nd, she threw back the sheets of her bed, and both knees were suddenly normal. Swelling had subsided, the water retention was completely gone, and that convinced her superiors in the convent that she had a vocation. She waited 2 more months to make her final profession, her solemn profession, I think, as a nun. That rapid improvement of her knees was viewed by Mother Angelica as a signal grace from God, an affirmation that she belonged in the order and in the Canton Monastery. So in Canton, they moved into this mansion that had been donated to the sisters from some kind of wealthy, I don't know, manufacturer. And during their weekly accusals, where they have to accuse themselves when they make a mistake, or even like a venial sin when they mess up, she says, "Mother, I accuse myself of breaking a porcelain knob on the bathtub," Sister Angelica declared, kneeling on the floor of the refectory. Then her superior says, "I know. We're only here a few weeks and you're already breaking the place apart," she says in a German accent. When Sister Angelica, Sister Rita, now she is Sister Angelica. She took that name Angelica, even though maybe she doesn't seem angelic. When she returned to the table, she matter-of-factly went about eating her food. A weepy, badly shaken postulant had just gone through the accusal process. She said, "How can you eat a meal after that?" And Sister Angelica says, "I'm hungry." She had an extremely thick skin and the ability to hold firm in times of adversity, and that will bear great fruit for her in her future life. At one point, she talks about, and this whole biography of her, Mother Angelica asked Raymond Arroyo, her biographer, that he not hold anything back, that he not try and polish this story to make her look good, but to be very real. And it really is. And it's beautiful for that. Mother Angelica at one point addressed her resentment to Jesus that he gave her all these painful things. She said, I got all these painful things and adoration on top of it. What do you think I am, a horse? And she heard Jesus respond, no, you're my bride. And she said, God, I never said that to him again, I tell you. So that porcelain knob breaking off the bathtub, that place was falling apart. That new, even though it was a mansion and had, I don't know, all these rooms, it still somehow was too small and fragile for the order. So she says to Mother Angelica, says to her Mother Superior, we got to fix this place up. And Mother Superior says, I know, but we don't have the money to do it. And Mother Angelica says, don't you worry, I'll take care of this. Angelica had a ready-made solution. I'll get some of the boys over here. Remember, this is her hometown in Canton. The boys from the old neighborhood in southeast Canton were persuaded to join the nuns' crew. For the most part, they donated their labor. I got as many honest ones as I could, and a few mixed in between. Mother Angelica said with a knowing smile. So this begins her building projects, and she is going to be a prolific builder. In high school, she had taken a class in blueprint reading, and that really served her well because she would hobble in among, with her legs and back and everything else, she'd hobble in among these work crews and work sites and in full habit. And the men all respected her, all wouldn't do anything without her say so. Any final decision had to come through her, and she often knew better than they what was going on. So these boys from her old neighborhood became as Angelica's Tonys. She would stay up with her Tonys until 2 o'clock in the morning, plying them with instructions and stale donuts. 3 hours later, she would rise with the rest of the community and begin her day of prayer anew. Her dad came to visit her at this point in the convent and asked if she needed anything. He had been tailor. She saw that she had some grease stains on her habit, and it was like, can I bring you anything, your favorite detergent? And at one point she says, no, I don't think so, Dad. And that was the first and last time she would call him Dad. When the letter came from the Mother Superior that the mother would be allowed to visit and not John Rizzo, he died of a heart attack just 6 months after that. Sister Angelica's only comfort was the fact that he had received last rites at the hospital. So there's this interesting scene with Mother Angelica and a confessor that came to the convent, maybe a spiritual director too, but at least a confessor. What is your name? The priest asked. Sister Angelica. Sister Angelica said, Angelica, you're an ass. What? The incredulous nun asked. You heard me. I said you're an ass. Then the priest changed tactics. Why did you come here? I came here to be a saint. Then why don't you love her? So Sister Angelica had been confessing that problems and hatred and wrath against one of her fellow nuns. Then why don't you love her? God Almighty is having a hard time loving her. I asked why you aren't loving her. The priest bore in. If you want to be a saint, you should expect somebody hard to live with. You should expect that kind of suffering and make every effort to love her. Sister Angelica began to realize that observing the constitutions was not enough. Constitutions of the religious order was not enough to attain holiness. In the face of blistering tirades and what she termed schizophrenic behavior, Angelica made an earnest attempt to befriend Sister Mary of the Cross. Sister Mary of the Cross was Angelica's cross to bear. Suddenly, when I made an effort to love her, I found myself able to be more patient and loving toward everybody, not just her, but everybody. Mother Angelica said, when you're concentrating on anything that's disruptive in your life, you really don't love anybody. What good advice that is, that God's going to send you people to drive you crazy, whether it's kids or coworkers, whatever it is. Saint Jose Maria Escrivá says, do not say that person aggravates you, say that person sanctifies me. So that's number one. God's going to send you these people in your life for a reason. And if you are open to this and make efforts to love that person, it will heal other parts of you that are cold and incapable of loving. And then thirdly, if you focus on the aggravations that person gives you, instead of focusing on loving them, the reverse happens. You focus on them, and then you find yourself not being able to love anybody, becoming increasingly bitter and insular and self-centered. So that's that's in a nutshell, that's some extremely good spiritual advice. So, believing that those who are going to lead need to be humbled, the 79-year-old abbess must have seen leadership possibilities in Sister Angelica. She told her on one occasion, "Sister, if you don't change your manner, I'm going to change your name, Sister Angelica." If Mother Clare had to make a point to the community, Angelica was often the fall guy. Joan Frank, a former nun at Sancta Clara, remembered, if everyone was doing something, Angelica was singled out because they were singling her out for leadership. And it's about this time that Mother Angelica begins to have this inspiration to build a monastery down south. And just in time, she's using new technology to, instead of scrubbing floors on her knees, she buys a floor polisher. And somehow or another, the cord gets caught in between the brushes. The thing bucks her and throws her off balance and hit her in the stomach. She falls on the slippery floor and somehow aggravates a pre-existing back problem, spinal issue. She had an extra vertebrae, come to find out. It was a tough time in the convent at Sancta Clara, because of Sister Mary of the Cross. She had a habit of traumatizing less thick-skinned sisters. At this point, Mother Angelica begins taking on these weaker sisters and giving them spiritual direction, teaching them about the dark night of the soul from St. John of the Cross, and giving them spiritual reading to help them through all this. At one point, the Sister Mary of the Cross had to leave for a time, and Mother Angelica temporarily took leadership in the convent, and it was like a free, intoxicating light suddenly invaded the clenched lives of the young nuns. She began to talk to them, basically host these Mother Angelica Live sessions that she would become famous for, animated talks about submitting to divine providence and conversing with God throughout the day. She developed lasting relationships with some of the sisters whose vocation she saved in these moments, who were otherwise going to break down and leave the convent. And she began clandestinely providing spiritual direction to these. So at this point that she goes into back surgery, and with such wonderful bedside manner, the surgeon says to her, "Look, it's likely you're never going to walk again." And Mother Angelica is afraid of this. One of the sisters even remembers the doctor making a cut, throwing his instrument on the floor, and walking out. But Mother Angelica says to God, "Lord, if you let me walk again, I'll build you a monastery in the south." And that was the start of this promise, to build a monastery in the south. Yeah. And Mother Angelica confirmed the story about the doctor throwing down his scalpel, and actually a Muslim doctor finished the operation, sewed her up. 3 bags of blood mingled with her own. The names of the transfusion bottles were Luntz, Goldberg, and Cohen, a fact that furnished Angelica with a story she would repeat to Jewish groups for decades. "I've never been the same since," she would say with great chutzpah. So she begins to ask her Mother Superior, Mother Veronica, now. God allows her to walk. She survives that surgery, and she takes it as a sign to build that monastery. So this is going to begin a great example of how to be persistent, both with her superior and then with her superior, the bishop. "No," was Mother Veronica's first response, but under the pressure of Angelica's insistent pleas, the abbess slowly relented. Once convinced, Mother Veronica became a quiet advocate of the new foundation. In her private writings and letters, admitted that she considered Sister Angelica a genius. With support of the abbess, Angelica and her small band of nuns turned into a prayer militia, storming heaven for their southern monastery. Of course, they didn't know where to establish it. And at this point, Sister Mary of the Cross gives them another cross to bear. She decides that she wants to establish a new convent as well. So now, Mother Veronica has to decide. Sister Mary of the Cross is senior to Sister Angelica, so she would have precedent over Angelica to leave and create a new convent. So Mother Veronica, in an interesting exercise of leadership, comes up with a unique solution. Lacking the sisters necessary to establish 2 monasteries, Mother Veronica found herself in a quandary. On the one hand, a very vocal senior sister was demanding her own foundation. On the other, a younger nun with the markings of a leader felt God had called her to the south. Never one for confrontation, the abbess devised a solution to the stalemate, one worthy of Solomon. On behalf of each sister, Mother Veronica would write letters of introduction to the Bishop of St. Cloud, where Sister Mary of the Cross wanted to establish a convent, and the Archbishop of Mobile, Birmingham, where Mother Angelica wanted to establish a convent. The first nun to receive a positive response from a bishop could proceed with her foundation. The other would have to abandon her plans. January 8th, 1957, Mother Veronica mailed the 2 letters at the same time. Rivalry grew intense in the convent. Competing prayers and constant checks of the daily mailbag exacerbated tensions in the cloister. Sister Angelica would say, "Mine wrote first. Hers didn't write for a couple months." Archbishop Tulin's letter of January 12, 1957 warmly invited the Franciscan nuns into the diocese and encouraged them to establish a community in Birmingham, home to 250,000 black people. In some histories, some tellings of the story, it was reported that the Archbishop Tulin said, "Y'all come," but nowhere apparently in this correspondence does it say that, but I like that version of the story. So then another bombshell, another cross happens. The local bishop in Canton, Bishop Emmett Walsh, Youngstown, Ohio, drops a bombshell. He felt the community in Canton was not strong enough to divide and start a new convent. So Mother Angelica had to be persistent again. Another good exercise in what happens when somebody tells you no when God's telling you yes. He bluntly instructed the nuns to drop the idea of a new monastery. No doubt prompted by Sister Angelica, the abbess wrote a second letter to Bishop Walsh, 1957. While accepting the bishop's decision, she revealingly pleaded Angelica's cause. To her is a mission God has inspired her to fulfill. She has no rest, nor does she give me any in her effort to do what she thinks God is asking of her. So Mother Angelica also writes in her a letter. She says, "Would your excellency approve of this project and give your consent to it when the beginning of a new foundation will in no way weaken our community? This assurance from you would leave me free to continue building up, hoping, and planning for something that will eventually be a reality, even if now I will have to move my horizon to a further distance." So she says, okay, we can't establish a monastery in the South. Can we plan for it, raise money for it, even though we can't do it? And he's like, okay, you just have to be creative. Keep asking without asking. And you can see Bishop Tulin is gradually warming to the idea. Eventually she says, look, my health is failing here in the north. The warmth of the south would help me recover. That eventually does it. There's this cool story about the nuns. Sancta Clara wanted a grotto in their backyard dedicated to the Virgin Mother. And so the job of building it fell to Sister Angelica. She called every good, pious Catholic she knew, seeking help with the project, but no one offered their time. "I'm having a hard time getting people," she told Mother Veronica. "I do know some people who are a little different. I could call them. I don't care, as long as we get it built," the abbess said. So Sister Angelica calls a pool hall in southeast Canton and rouses the Tonys. Recognizing the voice on the other end of the line, Angelica screamed out, "When did you get out of jail?" After chit-chatting, she got down to business. "I need some of the boys. I'm having a hard time down here." Her Uncle Nick noticed her left leg swiveling awkwardly as she walked. She was compensating by throwing her body to one side because of spinal pain and messing up her alignment. She needed some hemlock trees for this grotto, and one of the Tonys like, "Oh, I can get you some of that." And she's like, "No, you can't steal trees. He said, "Well, trees belong to God." And like, "No, we're not stealing trees." So what she does instead, she calls the head of the local syndicate. In addition to money, she had a spiritual goal in mind. "I need $600 worth of hemlock trees," she told the mob boss. "All right, I'll write you a check." "No, I don't want you to do that. I want you to get checks from all the boys and give them to me. I'm going to put their names on a piece of parchment, roll it up, and put it inside the statue of Our Lady that we're building for this grotto." "Are you nuts? I can't do that," the mob boss said. Mother Angelica said, "Nobody's going to see it. It'll be buried in concrete, like you're going to be one of these days if you don't straighten up." The mob boss said nothing. "See what you can do," Mother Angelica said, placing the phone on its cradle. A few days later, a stretch limo appears in the front of the monastery. Angelica links arms with the syndicate head and leads him to Marian Grotto. "You really want people like me to buy those trees?" the mobster asked. "Yes, I do. I need people like you to buy these trees so that one day, if you're ever in a lot of trouble, you'll remember the Lord and his mother." She slipped the man a Sacred Heart badge, as she will often do to tough people in her life, and I think we should all do that, maybe give them miraculous medals. She slipped him a Sacred Heart badge and showed him out of the monastery. Within days, the mail brought a pile of checks bearing the names of well-known businessmen from the Canton community. In calligraphy, Sister Raphael committed their names to a parchment scroll and placed it inside the statue of Mary, where it rests today, surrounded by hemlock trees. Eventually, Archbishop Tulin is going to write Bishop Walsh to help encourage him to allow for Sister Angelica to build her monastery in the South. Sister Angelica is going to write him again using some new arguments. About 3 years ago, Your Excellency gave our Reverend Mother permission to have my friends prepare for the future foundation in Alabama. To date, the property given to us has increased in value, and we have several bricklayers and tradesmen, all friends ready to donate their labor. They would like to start in the winter because they do not work up here at that time and would like to be able to build a monastery during the winter months. I'm including a crude sketch of the plan which I made. Proposed income, expense sheet, budgets, figures are based on what we've done here. During my recent trip, she tells the bishop, to the Cleveland Clinic, the doctors told me the only way to prevent the left limb, I guess her left leg, from complete disability is to go to a hot climate. The nerve and the spine is exposed, and cold winter months are very hard. I'm willing to accept whatever Jesus wants from me, but if Your Excellency thought we might be able to go to Alabama, we'd be able to start soon, and would only mean one more winter to endure. Even though the use of my left limb is at stake, I'm willing to give it to our Lord if Your Excellency thinks we are not ready yet. So I think at that point, she finally convinces the bishop. She touches him with that argument, and he says yes. So now they have to think of some money-making schemes to purchase the land and all that sort of thing. Her first idea is to raise earthworms. Oh, God, no, Mother Veronica said in response. Then flipping through a copy of Popular Mechanics, Mother Angelica sees an ad for fishing lures. So she buys a starter kit, and the nuns start making fishing lures. Long story short, Sports Illustrated does an article about these nuns making St. Peter's fishing lures, and they raise a bunch of money for these fishing lures, and that's how they pay for the first purchase down south. You can see her background in advertising at Timken roller bearing coming in handy. So in the next rounds of fundraising, she'll write a Christmas message in 1961 to all her message lists. She has lists of addresses, and she calls these people her family. She'll do that into the EWTN days. She says, "Dear family, we just wanted you to know that your cloister is almost complete, and that you have given Jesus the most wonderful gift in the world for a birthday present, a new and beautiful throne." So she would allow her extended family to feel a sense of personal ownership over her projects. Everybody was in it together. This concept would continue and thrive as she took on new and larger apostolates. Driving down to Alabama finally, they stay at a motel. 1961 motel in Alabama marks the first time Mother Angelica actually sees a television set. She didn't watch any program because you had to put a quarter in it or something. But in that Atlanta motel room, she made the acquaintance of the instrument that would transform her life. Once in Alabama, she starts making friends with the Italian community down there. She started gathering crowds when she'd have speaking events. As I say, she started being called to a lot of speaking events. When she had been welcomed in the community, people just adored listening to her. And for her speaking technique, she made an entry in the community history, March 22nd, 1961. I think the best preparation is to have no preparation. Jesus will tell me what to say when the time comes. I think that's awesome. I love it whenever I see priests or Catholic speakers go up to the podium or go up in front of a huge audience, bow their head, pray quietly in silence, and just wait for inspiration to come. I give a lot of talks when I have books come out and things like that, and I always have something prepared. I love questions because that's where the Holy Spirit can really come in. But I wish I would do this more. I think it's so nerve-wracking, but it just shows what trust you have to put yourself completely in the hands of God. Got a big hole there. Blind old man yelled from across the pit. There was a giant pit where they were trying to build this cloister, and it was sort of a design hole in Mother Angelica's blueprints. Hocking his moistened tobacco into the abyss, he sauntered closer to Angelica. "You need some dirt? I got a hill and back in my house, and every time it rains, things in my basement. You want it?" She did. Within days, his hill became fill. and the problem was solved. So it's just like every time she encounters some problem or some lack of money, something miraculous is going to happen. It's an endless series of miracles, like a string of them, like beads on a rosary. The monastery became an ecumenical touchstone in Birmingham, a project that inspired Protestants, Jews, and Catholics alike, all because of the personality of Mother Angelica. She says, when I read the life of St. Teresa of Avila, and it said she went to confession every day, I could never figure out just why. You know, of course, that she built 15 of these foundations, 15 convents, but even then it never dawned on me why she would go to confession every day. Well, now I know. There are some days I could go twice. Mother Angelica she was addressing 300 people at a Birmingham diocesan function. Monsignor introduced her as the bigger beggar this city has ever seen. She gets her hands on you and you're finished. Mother took the podium, explaining the nocturnal adoration the sisters maintain before the Blessed Sacrament and the constant prayer they offer for the people of Birmingham, regardless of race or creed. She gave a little funny talk about difficulties trying to turn off a lamp in that Atlanta motel and dealing with modernity, and she hoped it would be the last of her speeches. Little did she know it was going to be the beginning of an entire career of talking before the public. I don't care, the Archbishop Tulin would say to her. He's a large man. He said, I don't care, starts shifting out of his seat. You just stop building right now. As he rose, the captain's chair was still attached to his plentiful backside. Well, I didn't know what to do, Mother Angelica told me, holding for the laugh. I didn't want to pull it off of him. A few wiggles later, the chair was free and the somewhat embarrassed Archbishop left. Not knowing what her next step would be, a disappointed Angelica grabbed her crutch and went out to the work site, where she called the crew together. Well, she said, we've run out of money, and the Archbishop said we have to stop building. He can't tell me to stop, the owner of Canterbury Electric shouted back. But I can't pay you, Sister said. Sister, for you to owe me money is like having money in the bank, the electrician said. I'm going to finish the job. The plumber, the bricklayers, and Tommy Odo followed suit. There were other obstacles. The bishop tried to get him to stop building this cloister because they ran out of money, another obstacle. And then people start shooting guns at their temporary cloister in the middle of the night and try terrorizing the nuns. But none of that worked. The devil did not get his way, and that cloister was finished. So May Frances becomes their first postulant, and this is where Angelica jokes that she has become her own grandmother, because now May calls her Mother Angelica. It's at this point, and we're about to, I think, finish this episode, she builds her convent differently. She wants her order to focus not on all these punishments and debasements and humiliations. She wants to focus on a family. She wants her monastery to be a family. That's an approach I take with my family. We call it's not just a domestic church, but a domestic monastery. That I'm an abbot and my wife's the abbess, and the kids are like our monastery, our monks. So instead of penances, they play Monopoly for recreation. She's trying to make it a little bit more relaxed. And she started pioneering a monastery where there was no longer an isolated individual seeking self alone, but a togetherness, one in will and purpose and love. And whenever big decisions happened, she would consult with all her sisters, with all the nuns, and they would collectively give all their views and thoughts, and then they'd make a decision together. Once she selected a course of action, the sisters would unify behind it and pray for a positive outcome. She never had to deal, well, she did a little bit later on, but she never really had to deal with dissension within the ranks. She was a great general in that she got buy-in from all her quote-unquote underlings, all those beneath her, because she never treated them like they were beneath her. And so it wasn't just her charging into battle. She was a great builder of coalitions within her convent and beyond. I think that's a great mark of leadership that she's giving examples of throughout this story. During recreation, this recreation they do, in the summer of 1962, one of the sisters had a brainstorm. The nun suggests that Mother Angelica record a little heart-to-heart talk that could be sold they have a gift shop to supporters. A group of enthusiastic lay people agreed to cover the costs of recording and duplication. In August of 1962, Angelica recorded her first talk, entitled Love for You. Backed by piano accompaniment, the 45 RPM meditation explained God's personal love for each individual. By Christmas of that year, 1,500 copies had been sold. So it's a good note for things to come. I guess I'll finish this part of I didn't want to make it too episodes, but I think it was pretty much inevitable. We'll finish the amazing rise of Mother Angelica and EWTN, her studio and television radio empire next episode. But we'll end this episode by talking about that Christmas after she sold her first kind of media content. The family at Our Lady of Angels Monastery, that's what they called it, welcomed a new member. Upon completing her term as abbess at Sancta Clara, Mother Veronica permanently transferred to the Southern Foundation. Her affection for Mother Angelica and the deteriorating personal conditions in Canton made the relocation inevitable. In a supreme act of humility, she submitted herself to her spiritual daughter, Angelica, offering quiet guidance and support whenever it was required. So, isn't that amazing? Mother Angelica would become mother to her biological mother and her spiritual mother. This is a sign of what was to come and the great potential for her leadership. And we'll end with this quote. Her approach was straightforward. If he wants it, if God wants it, if he wants it, we do it. And we do it no matter what it takes. That's what pushes me. So I hope you enjoyed this first of, I'm thinking, 2 episodes on Mother Angelica, based on Raymond Arroyo's book, Mother Angelica, The Remarkable Story of a Nun, Her Nerve, and a Network of Miracles. The next episode will show you how that network of miracles explodes across the entire world. One of the most miraculous undertakings in certainly the last couple centuries of history. I think on par with what Father Al did for orphans, Mother Angelica will do with media, television, with radio. So thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode.